American soldier holds a carrier pigeon in France, 1943. When historians zoom in, they are shocked. In the basement of the Military History Institute of Paris, historian Isabelle Moreau was sorting through yellow documents from World War II. The air smelled of old, paper, and forgotten history. It was March 2023, and she had been spending months digitizing archives that included joint operations between Allied forces that had remained uncatalogued since 1945. Another box of unidentified photographs, she murmured, opening a container labeled Allied Operations, Normandy. 1943, 1944, among dozens of blurry images. One particular photograph caught her attention. It showed a young American soldier in a U.S. Army uniform, delicately holding a carrier pigeon beside a destroyed farm. His face reflected a strange mixture of determination and tenderness, and he wore OSS insignia. A typical war photo, she thought, placing the image into the high-resolution scanner. She had seen hundreds like it soldiers posing with animals, trying to humanize the horrors of conflict. But when the image appeared on her screen in high definition, something stopped her. Her trained eyes noticed a detail that decades had kept hidden on the pigeon's left leg, barely visible in the original photograph. Something was attached. Zooming in, what she saw left her breathless. A small metallic cylinder was firmly secured to the bird's leg. But what truly shocked her was what she could distinguish on its surface markings that appeared to be coordinates. 4019, 20.15 N. Ling Wushisan Sijarderti, W. Isabelle frowned. As an expert in Allied operations during World War II, she knew the coordinates of major documented missions in Normandy. These didn't correspond to any of them. What was an American soldier doing in 1943 with a pigeon carrying unknown coordinates? Why had this operation never been documented in either American or French archives? The photograph that had seemed ordinary now glowed on her screen like a window into an 8-year-old mystery. The OSS insignia suggested this wasn't just any soldier. This was likely an intelligence operative. Isabelle felt the familiar tingle every historian recognizes. She was facing an extraordinary discovery. She picked up her phone and dialed her colleague Jacques at the Liberation Museum. "I need you to come immediately. I think we found something that will change everything we believe we know about American operations in occupied France." The search for answers had just begun. Jacques Scu. Rousseau arrived at the Institute an hour later, his shoes echoing against the floor as he hurried down the basement stairs. At 62, with an impeccable reputation as an expert in World War II Allied communications, he had seen enough documents to know when something was truly exceptional. "Show me what you found," he said, without preamble, adjusting his glasses as he approached Isabelle's monitor. She enlarged the image until the metallic cylinder and OSS insignia filled most of the screen. "Look at these markings, Jacques. They're precise coordinates, but they don't match any known American or French operation in Normandy," she explained, pointing to the clearly visible numbers. Jacques squinted, studying every pixel. He took a magnifying glass and examined the original photograph more closely. "Isabelle, have you noticed the quality of this pigeon? More importantly, look at his uniform details." He slowly straightened. "This soldier is wearing OSS insignia, but is also carrying French resistance communication equipment." "What does that mean?" The Office of Strategic Services worked closely with French resistance networks. "But I've never seen documentation of Americans using carrier pigeons for intelligence in occupied France." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "According to all records we know, the OSS relied primarily on radio communications and human couriers in this area." Isabelle felt her pulse quicken. "Are you suggesting this American operative was running an undocumented intelligence network?" Jacques pointed to the background of the photograph. "There's something else. Do you see this structure behind the soldier? That destroyed farm looks familiar." They moved to the large table, where he spread out detailed maps of 1943 Normandy. His fingers traced the topographical lines until stopping at a specific point. If these coordinates are correct, the message was directed to an area that in 1943 was heavily fortified by the Germans. It was part of the Atlantic Wall. That doesn't make sense. Why would an American OSS operative send coordinates into German territory? Jacques looked at her gravely. Unless he had infiltrated German lines. The OSS was known for extremely dangerous deep cover operations. He paused, studying the photograph again. Look at his expression, Isabel. This isn't a man posing for a routine photo. This is someone who knows he's about to undertake a mission that could cost him his life. For the next 3 days, Isabel and Jacques worked tirelessly to identify the mysterious American soldier. The photograph had been found alongside documents dated between August and September 1943, providing a crucial time frame. Look at this, Isabel said. Looking up from recently declassified OSS personnel records, I found references to an American operative matching the physical description. Isabel said. Lieutenant Robert Bob Harrison, born in Chicago in 1920, signed to OSS Special Operations in France in March 1943. Jacques stepped closer, intrigued. What else does his file say? That's what's strange, Isabel replied. His archive is extremely brief for an OSS operative. It only mentions that he was assigned to special liaison operations with French resistance networks and operated in the rural area of Calvados. She frowned. For an American intelligence officer, there's remarkably little information about his specific missions. That suggests his work was classified at the highest levels, Jacques observed. The OSS was known for compartmentalizing its most sensitive operations. Are there family references? Isabel turned the pages. Parents in Chicago. Father was an engineer. Mother, a teacher. He studied at Northwestern University before enlisting. She paused. Wait, there's something else. At the end of the file, there's a handwritten note. See classified archive. Operation Nightingale. Jacques' eyes widened. Operation Nightingale. That's not in any standard OSS records I know. They spent hours searching for references to the mysterious operation, but the standard archives yielded nothing. Jacques decided to contact his American counterpart at the CIA Historical Review Program. I called Dr. Sarah Mitchell, he explained, after hanging up. She specializes in declassified OSS operations. She says Operation Nightingale was so highly classified that even she's never seen the full files. But she remembers rumors about an American operative who worked with unconventional communication methods in occupied France. Unconventional methods? Isabel asked. According to what she's heard. There was an OSS operative who had studied animal behavior before the war and developed innovative ways to use animals for intelligence gathering, Jacques said. The story was that he could train pigeons to fly complex routes that German forces couldn't track or intercept. Isabel studied the photograph again. Have you noticed how confidently he holds the pigeon? This isn't someone who's just learned the skill. He's holding it like a master trainer, as if that pigeon was part of a sophisticated intelligence network that could change the course of the war. Jacques murmured. They decided to plot the coordinates on a modern satellite map. The location pointed directly to the Long-sur-Mer Memorial, one of the most heavily fortified points of the German Atlantic Wall. An American OSS operative had been sending intelligence about one of the most heavily defended positions in Hitler's fortress Europe, Isabel realized. But how had he obtained that information, and who was he sending it to? The next morning, Isabel and Jacques drove to Long-sur-Mer, a small coastal town in Calvados. During the war, it had been one of the most feared German defensive positions along the Atlantic Wall. The sea winds struck their faces as they walked toward the memorial. 4-100- and -50- mm cannons, Jacques explained, pointing to the massive concrete structures rising before them. These batteries completely controlled the maritime approach to Omaha and Gold Beaches. Any Allied vessel attempting to land would have been at their mercy. Isabel checked the coordinates on her GPS. We're exactly at the point marked by the Pigeon's message. But I don't understand. Why would Lieutenant Harrison send these coordinates in 1943? Allied intelligence already knew about these fortifications. Maybe it wasn't about the existence of the batteries, Jacques reflected, but something more specific. Only someone with access to German construction details would know. He approached a casemate and examined the information plaques. "Isabel, come see this," she read aloud. The batteries were neutralized on June 6, 1944, by extraordinarily precise naval bombardment. From USS Arkansas and HMS Ajax, the precision was so remarkable that the cannons were destroyed in the first salvo. Something unusual for an operation against such heavily fortified positions. Extraordinary precision. Isabel repeated slowly. What if Harrison's message didn't contain just general coordinates, but specific information about structural vulnerabilities, details only someone with engineering knowledge would recognize? At the visitor center, an elderly guide named Michael offered additional insight. "My father worked on the reconstruction after the war," he said. "He always told a curious story about these batteries and an American who helped plan their destruction." An American? Both historians asked at once. "Well, not during the battle itself," Michael replied. "But my father said that in late 1943, there were rumors about an American who somehow gained access to the German construction plans. The local resistance called him El American, or was it the American with the birds?" "The American with the birds," Isabel echoed. "According to the stories," Michael continued, "this American could make pigeons fly to places no French operative dared to go. Supposedly, he had birds that could land near German positions, observe activity, and return with information." He paused. "My father always said it sounded impossible. But after D-Day, when people saw how precisely the naval bombardment struck the weak points in the concrete, many began to believe the stories might be true." Jacques and Isabel exchanged meaningful glances. "Michel, did your father ever mention what happened to this American operative?" Isabel asked. "That's the sad part of the story," Michel replied. "According to local accounts, El Americano Owazo disappeared in October 1943, just weeks after sending what people said was his most important message. Some believed he tried to infiltrate German lines one last time and never returned. Back in Paris, they viewed their discovery with new clarity. Lieutenant Robert Harrison wasn't merely an American soldier with pigeons. He was a highly trained OSS operative who had created an innovative society intelligence network and paid the ultimate price for gathering critical information about German defenses. Isabel and Jacques decided to pursue the highest levels of classified American archives. The reference to Operation Nightingale had intensified their curiosity, and they suspected additional documents existed within the most restricted sections of both American and French intelligence records. Jacques contacted Dr. Sarah Mitchell at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. "If anyone can help us access classified OSS documents from that period, it's her," he explained as he placed the international call. Dr. Mitchell, a specialist in declassified OSS operations with 25 years of experience, agreed to meet with them virtually and share recently released materials. "Operation Nightingale," she repeated thoughtfully during their video conference. "I've finally been able to access those files." It wasn't a standard OSS operation. It was a joint initiative between American intelligence and a select group of French scientists and animal behaviorists. Isabel leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "It was conceived after Pearl Harbor, when the OSS realized it needed innovative communication methods that German forces couldn't detect or intercept. Dr. Mitchell shared her screen, displaying declassified documents. Lieutenant Robert Harrison, codenamed Nightingale, was recruited not only for his intelligence training, but for his pre-war studies in animal psychology at Northwestern University. Animal psychology. Jacques asked. Harrison wrote his undergraduate thesis on avian navigation and had worked with carrier pigeons as a hobby since childhood, Dr. Mitchell continued. When the OSS needed someone who could establish communications in occupied France without relying on radio transmissions, Harrison was the ideal candidate. Isabel felt her heart race. What kind of intelligence network did he establish? Dr. Mitchell scrolled through the files. Harrison developed what the OSS called Project Wingspan, a network of trained pigeons capable of carrying messages between French resistance cells and Allied command. But his innovation went further. He trained pigeons to conduct visual reconnaissance over German positions and return with coded intelligence on troop movements, fortification weaknesses, and defensive preparations. And all of this was done with pigeons. Yes, Harrison's system was revolutionary. Each bird carried microcameras developed by OSS Technical Services, along with coded message capsules. The pigeons photographed German positions during flight and delivered both images and reports to predetermined collection points, where resistance operatives transmitted the intelligence to London. Dr. Mitchell paused at a critical document. The photograph you found was taken on September 12, 1943. Day Harrison sent what his handlers called the golden egg. It was a pigeon carrying detailed photographs and structural analysis of the Atlantic Wall's most critical defensive position, information that allowed Allied naval forces to calculate exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Jacques said quietly. "There's something more troubling," Dr. Mitchell added, her expression darkening. Harrison knew his cover was compromised. German counterintelligence had begun tracking unusual pigeon activity in the region. The mission documented in your photograph wasn't just intelligence gathering. It was his final transmission before attempting a dangerous extraction. The mystery deepened. Lieutenant Robert Harrison had been a pioneering OSS operative whose unconventional methods provided crucial intelligence for D-Day. But what had happened to him after that final pigeon flight? The revelation that his position had been compromised transformed their investigation. They were no longer simply reconstructing an intelligence operation. They were searching for the fate of an American hero whose sacrifice had helped secure the liberation of France. If Harrison disappeared in October 1943, Isabel said, studying maps of Calvados while cross-referencing them with OSS operational zones, we need to find testimonies from people who were in the area during those exact dates. Their investigation led them to the American Battle Monuments Commission archives in Paris, where they hoped to find records of missing American personnel. The archivist, Mrs. Helen Crawford, American expatriate who had devoted her career to preserving the memory of U.S. servicemen, was immediately intrigued by their inquiry. "Lieutenant Robert Harrison," she said, pulling up computerized records. "That name appears in our missing in action files, but with very little detail. According to our records, he was officially listed as missing on October 15, 1943. However, there's a notation that his case was transferred to classified OS records. Do you have any local testimonies about American operatives in that region?" Jacques asked. Mrs. Crawford smiled knowingly. "Actually, I do. I've been collecting oral histories from French families for 20 years. Several families in the Calvados region have stories about American operatives who worked with the resistance." She opened a filing cabinet. "One story in particular has always fascinated me." She removed a folder containing interview transcripts. The Dubois family. They owned a farm near Cirey-la-Forêt. The grandmother, Marie Dubois, gave me an interview in 2001, shortly before she died at the age of 93. She claimed that in 1943, an American soldier with magic birds stayed hidden on their farm for several weeks. Magic birds, Isabel repeated, according to Marie. This American could make pigeons do things that seemed impossible. Mrs. Crawford continued. He had birds that would fly out in the morning and return in the evening, landing exactly where he instructed them. She said he spoke fluent French and had kind eyes, but seemed deeply worried about something. Mrs. Crawford turned the pages. But here's the most interesting part. Marie said that in early October 1943, the American told the family he had to undertake one final mission. He needed to personally deliver crucial information to Allied forces, and the only way to do it was to cross directly through German lines. Did he explain why he couldn't use his pigeons for this final mission? Jacques asked. According to Marie, the American said the information was too important and too sensitive to entrust to pigeons. Mrs. Crawford replied. He had discovered something that required immediate face-to-face communication with Allied command. She paused. Marie's last memory of him was watching him walk into the forest on October 12, 1943, carrying a small backpack and saying he would return before winter if everything went well. He never returned, Isabel said quietly. No, Mrs. Crawford replied. But Marie said something strange happened 2 weeks later. A pigeon landed on their farm, one they recognized as belonging to the American. It carried a small metal capsule, but instead of codes or messages, it contained a single item. Mrs. Crawford opened an envelope attached to the transcript. Marie kept this until her death and asked that it be preserved in our archives. She revealed a tiny American flag, no larger than a postage stamp, wrapped in waterproof material. Harrison's final message, Jacques whispered. He wanted the family to know he had completed his mission, even if he couldn't return himself. The discovery of Harrison's final message pushed Isabel and Jacques to intensify their search for what the American operative had uncovered information, too important to entrust to his pigeon. Net WORK, Dr. Mitchell in Virginia had promised to search for additional OS files related to Harrison's final days. I found something extraordinary, she announced during their next video conference, her voice filled with urgency. Buried deep in classified OSS files that were only declassified last month, Harrison's final intelligence report. She shared her screen, displaying a document marked Ultra Secret Eyes Only, dated October 10, 1943. Listen to this, she said. Nightingale to Overwatch. Have discovered German knowledge of Neptune landing zones. Repeat, Germans aware of intended Normandy operations. Source, captured Allied communications and double-agent network. German reinforcements being positioned specifically to counter beach landings at predetermined coordinates. Jacques felt his blood run cold. Harrison had discovered that the Germans knew about D-Day plans. Dr. Mitchell continued. Not just that they knew, but that they had intercepted enough Allied intelligence to know exactly where the landings would occur. She read on. Enemy preparing concentrated defense at Omaha and Gold sectors. Casualties will be catastrophic unless landing points adjusted. Cannot transmit via wingspan. German counterintelligence monitoring all pigeon activity. Will attempt direct contact with Allied forces via fishing vessel extraction. Coordinates, 4,923 feet 12 inches N. Isabel plotted the coordinates on her map. Those coordinates point to a small cove near Arromanches, about 5 kilometers from Longsermer. The report concludes with this, Dr. Mitchell said, her voice turning somber. If extraction fails, secondary plan is to reach German command structure and attempt sabotage of communication systems to delay their response to invasion. Either way, Neptune must succeed. America is counting on Normandy. Lieutenant R. Harrison, OSS. The room fell silent as the implications settled in. Harrison hadn't merely discovered that the Germans knew about DD. He had realized he might be the only person capable of warning Allied command in time to adjust their plans and save thousands of lives. "There's one more document," Dr. Mitchell continued. A post-war intelligence assessment from 1946. She shared another file. After D-Day's success, OSS analysts compared German defensive positions on June 6, 1944, with Harrison's final report. Their conclusion was that his intelligence had been received and acted upon. How did they know? Isabel asked. Because the actual D-Day landings occurred precisely 3 kilometers east of where Harrison warned the Germans were expecting them. The shift in landing zones he recommended in his final report was implemented, avoiding the heavily defended positions he identified. Jacques shook his head in disbelief. So Harrison's sacrifice wasn't in vain. His final mission changed the course of D-Day, even though he never lived to see it. But how did his intelligence reach Allied command if he never made it to the extraction point? Isabel wondered aloud. Dr. Mitchell offered a sad smile. That's the final piece of the puzzle. According to captured German records recovered after the war, an American operative was arrested while attempting to sabotage German communications equipment at a command post near Bayeux on October 14, 1943. The operative refused to give his name or rank, but he had concealed microfilm containing detailed intelligence on German defensive preparations. Harrison was captured during his sabotage mission, Jacques realized, and executed 2 days later, but not before he successfully transmitted the microfilm to French resistance operatives, who passed it on to London. Lieutenant Robert Harrison died ensuring his final intelligence reached Allied command, ultimately saving countless American and Allied lives on D-Day, armed with Dr. Mitchell's revelations. Isabel and Jacques sought to verify how Harrison's intelligence had shaped the actual D-Day operations. They contacted Colonel James Peterson, retired D-Day historian and former U.S. Army intelligence officer at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, Lieutenant Robert Harrison. Operation Nightingale. Colonel Peterson's voice crackled with recognition during the video call. "You've uncovered one of the most classified success stories of the entire European theater. I've been waiting 30 years for those files to be declassified." "You knew about Harrison?" Isabel asked, astonished. "Not the full story, but enough." In intelligence circles, Harrison was legendary, the OSS operative who used pigeons to change the course of D-Day. The official record stayed classified because it revealed too much about our methods. Colonel Peterson shared his screen, displaying detailed D-Day planning documents. "Look at these invasion plans. The original Neptune operation called for landings at coordinates that would have sent our forces straight into the German defenses Harrison identified. The documents showed 2 sets of landing coordinates, the original plans dated April 1943 and revised plans dated November 1943. That revision came directly from Harrison's final report," Peterson explained. Allied command shifted the Gold Beach landings exactly 3 kilometers east, avoiding concentrated artillery and machine gun positions. What would have happened without Harrison's intelligence? Jacques asked. "Catastrophe," Peterson replied. Post-war analysis estimated casualties at Gold Beach would have been 300% higher potentially. 15,000 additional American and British casualties on the first day alone. He brought up casualty reports. Instead, Gold Beach became one of our most successful landing zones, secured within 6 hours with minimal losses. And there's more. Harrison's warning that the Germans knew our plans forced Allied command to fully implement Operation Bodyguard, the deception campaign that convinced the Germans the main invasion would come at Calais rather than Normandy. Isabel finally grasped the full magnitude of Harrison's contribution. So his sacrifice didn't just save lives on D-Day. It helped ensure the success of the entire operation. Exactly. Colonel Peterson said. But here's what makes Harrison's story even more remarkable. Colonel Peterson said as he brought up aerial reconnaissance photographs from June 6, 1944. Look at these images of the long Surmir batteries being neutralized. The photos showed astonishing precision bombardment. The German guns destroyed within minutes. This surgical strike had been possible because of the detailed structural analysis Harrison provided in September 1943. His Pigeon network had photographed construction flaws that allowed for exact targeting. One man, working alone behind enemy lines, had supplied intelligence that altered the strategic calculus of the largest military operation in history. Jacques stared at the images in awe. Colonel Peterson nodded gravely, and he paid the ultimate price for it. Lieutenant Robert Harrison proved that sometimes one person, in the right place at the right time, can change the course of history. His pigeons didn't just carry messages, they carried hope for the liberation of Europe. Why was his story kept classified for so long? Isabel asked. 2 reasons, Peterson replied. First, revealing his methods would have compromised similar operations in other theaters. Second, the OS wanted to protect the French families who helped him. In 1945, there were still German sympathizers in France who might have sought revenge. Now, 80 years later, his story can finally be told, Jacques said quietly. More than that, Isabel added. It should be told, Lieutenant Robert Harrison represented the best of American courage and ingenuity. His story deserved to be remembered alongside the greatest heroes of World War II. Isabel and Jacques felt the weight of responsibility in bringing an American hero story to light after 8 decades of secrecy. Harrison had sacrificed everything to ensure today's success. Yet his contribution had been erased from official histories to protect operational security. We have an obligation to tell his story, Isabel said as she organized their documents and photographs. Harrison died believing his sacrifice might never be acknowledged. Now, enough time has passed for his heroism to be recognized without endangering anyone. They decided to contact Harrison's family. Through genealogical records and with Dr. Mitchell's help at the CIA, they discovered that Robert had a younger sister, Dorothy, who married and moved to San Diego after the war. Dorothy's daughter, Susan Harrison Williams, now 68, was a retired teacher living in California. When they called Susan, her reaction was immediate and emotional. My Uncle Bobby. We always wondered what really happened to him. We were told he died in a classified operation in France, but we never knew the details. Mrs. Harrison Williams, Isabel said gently. We have information about your uncle that we believe you and your family should know. Would you be willing to speak with us? 2 days later, they held a video conference with Susan and several other Harrison family members, including Robert's great-nephew, Captain Michael Harrison, currently serving in the U.S. Air Force. When they showed the photograph of Robert's yo holding the pigeon and explained their findings, the family was overwhelmed. You mean Uncle Bobby was a hero who helped win D-Day? Susan asked, tears streaming down her face. My whole life, I wondered about the uncle I'd never met. My grandmother always said he was special, but she died never knowing what he had actually accomplished. Your uncle didn't just contribute to D-Day's success, Jacques said. His intelligence and sacrifice likely saved thousands of American lives and helped ensure the liberation of Western Europe. The Pigeon communication network he developed was one of the most innovative intelligence operations of the war. Captain Harrison was visibly moved. As a serving officer, I can appreciate the courage it took for Uncle Bobby to operate alone behind enemy lines, knowing he might never come home. Susan then revealed something extraordinary. After the war, my grandmother received a small package from the War Department. It contained Uncle Bobby's personal effects, including a journal we never understood. She held up a leather-bound notebook. It's filled with drawings of pigeons and notes that look like code. "Would you be willing to share it with us?" Isabel asked. It might contain additional information about his operations. When Susan scanned and sent the pages, they discovered it was Robert's operational diary, documenting the training of individual pigeons, their flight patterns, and coded references to intelligence gathered. The final entry, dated October 11, 1943. Read, "Tomorrow I carry out the most important mission of my life. If these words are ever found, know that I died believing America would be free and France would be liberated. The birds have done their job. Now I must do mine. Lieutenant Harrison, OSS." He knew he might not survive, Captain Harrison said quietly, but he went anyway. That evening, Susan organized a video call with dozens of Harrison family members across the United States. For the first time in 8 decades, Lieutenant Robert Harrison's true story was shared within his family, and his name was spoken with the pride and honor it deserved. "I'm going to take my grandchildren to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans," Susan announced. "They deserve to know that their great-great-uncle was one of the heroes who made D-Day possible." 6 months after their initial discovery, Isabel and Jack organized an unprecedented international ceremony to honor the memory of Lieutenant Robert Harrison. The event took place simultaneously in 3 locations: Long-sur-Mer in France, the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and Northwestern University in Chicago, all connected by a live video feed. On September 12, 2024, exactly 81 years after Harrison sent his final intelligence, pigeon crowds gathered at all 3 sites. In Long-sur-Mer were Isabel, Jacques, local officials, and representatives from the American Embassy. In New Orleans, the Harrison family assembled alongside military historians and veterans. At Northwestern University, students and faculty gathered to honor their alumnus hero. "Today, we correct a historical injustice," Isabel began, addressing all 3 audiences via live broadcast. For 8 decades, Lieutenant Robert Harrison's sacrifice remained classified. Today, we can finally acknowledge that this young American's courage and ingenuity helped ensure the success of D-Day and the liberation of Europe. Double quotes, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, joining from CIA headquarters, presented newly declassified documents. On behalf of the Central Intelligence Agency and the legacy of the OSS, it is my honor to officially recognize Lieutenant Robert Harrison as one of America's most innovative and effective intelligence operatives of World War II. U.S. Ambassador to France stepped forward at Long-sur-Mer, carrying a folded American flag. In recognition of Lieutenant Harrison's extraordinary service and ultimate sacrifice, the United States posthumously awards him the Distinguished Service Cross, America's second-highest military decoration. In New Orleans, Susan Harrison Williams accepted the medal on behalf of her family, her voice breaking with emotion. Uncle Bobby died far from home, believing his family might never know what he had accomplished. Today, finally, he can rest in peace knowing his sacrifice is recognized and honored. The most moving moment came when Jacques unveiled a bronze sculpture at Long-sur-Mer, depicting Harrison releasing a pigeon toward the horizon. The inscription read, "Lieutenant Robert Harrison, U.S. Army, OSS, 1920 to 1943. The American with the birds. His pigeons carried hope across enemy lines. His courage changed the course of history. His sacrifice liberated a continent." At Northwestern University, the administration announced the establishment of the Robert Harrison Innovation in Service Scholarship for students studying both engineering and international relations. As the ceremony concluded, something remarkable occurred. A pigeon landed on the bronze statue at Long-sur-Mer, settling precisely on Harrison's outstretched hand. It remained there for several minutes, as if delivering a message. before flying west toward the Atlantic toward America. Captain Michael Harrison, watching from New Orleans, raised a salute as the Pigeon disappeared over the horizon. "Uncle Bobby's final mission is complete," he said quietly. "He's finally coming home." The photograph that had been forgotten in a dusty archive for 80 years now occupied a place of honor in the National World War II Museum. The CIA Museum and Northwestern University. Robert Harrison's story became a symbol of American ingenuity and sacrifice, proving that sometimes one person's courage can change the course of history. Lieutenant Robert Harrison sent his last pigeon in September 1943, carrying intelligence that helped liberate Europe. In September 2024, that pigeon finally delivered its most important message, that heroes are never truly forgotten, and that courage echoes across generations. His birds carried freedom across the skies of occupied France. Now his story would carry inspiration across the world, reminding future generations that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they serve something greater than themselves.